Hey everybody, before we get started, I want to thank some brand new Patreon supporters. Patrick Price, Steve Smalley, Steve Bodness, and Ryan Walquist. These four guys went to mountainandprairie.com/Patreon, and they're supporting the podcast financially on either a monthly or an annual basis. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, Patreon is the financial foundation of all things Mountain and Prairie. This is my real full-time job. It's all I do. And folks like these four guys and everybody else who has supported it over the years are what allow me to keep doing it. So really, really, really appreciate these guys. Appreciate everybody who's supported it over the years. There's a bunch of benefits that come with being a Patreon supporter. You can get stickers. I have a Patreon exclusive podcast that comes out once a month. I've got a Patreon newsletter. There's a long list of stuff. Go to mountainandprairie.com/support or mountainandprairie.com/Patreon, and you can see a long list of everything involved, but I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Ivan McClellan. Ivan's a photographer, writer, and storyteller who's shining a light on Black cowboy culture in a way that's never been done before. When we first talked back in 2020, Ivan was in the early stages of immersing himself in this world, capturing rodeos, meeting cowboys, and telling stories that had largely been overlooked. Now, nearly 5 years later, he's once again forging his own path by creating 8 Seconds Rodeo, an electrifying high-stakes event that's bringing some of the best cowboys and cowgirls in the country together to compete for serious prize money, all while celebrating a rich and important legacy. In this episode, Ivan shares the inspiring story of how 8 Seconds Rodeo came to life, from a passion project sparked by tragedy to a must-see event that's redefining the rodeo world. We dig into the challenges of launching something big from scratch, the power of storytelling to shift culture, and what it means to build something bigger than yourself. Ivan also talks about his new photography book, his creative process, and how he stays grounded while juggling everything he's got going on. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to our first podcast conversation, where we talk about Ivan's early life and upbringing, as well as his journey into professional photography and the world of Black rodeo. It's super inspiring to see how his career has grown and evolved over the last few years, and also to see how he's continued to be such a humble, hardworking family man. Whether you're a longtime rodeo fan or just love hearing stories about people chasing big, meaningful dreams, this conversation's for you. As always, you can find links to Ivan's work, 8 Seconds Rodeo, his book, and our first conversation in the episode notes. And if you're near Portland or Philadelphia in 2025, do yourself a favor and check out one of his rodeos. You won't regret it. Thanks to Ivan for the great conversation. Hope you enjoy. Ivan, it's been a while since we recorded one of these things. I think we've talked on the phone a few times in between, but we were just talking before we started recording about everything you've had going on and this just unbelievable ride you've been on that I'm so excited for. And it's not a surprise to me. I mean, when we first met virtually, I mean, I realized real quick you're a special guy with a special vision, and now here we are, and you got so much going on. So I guess the first very basic question is, how you doing? I mean, are you sleeping at all?
Nah, I'm good, man. Yeah, everything's going great. You know, you talked to me back in 2020. Yeah. And I was just sitting at home. I was skipping rocks with the kids down at the river, like, you know, unemployed, but had this cowboy thing going on. And so I appreciate you reaching out to me in the get-go. You're a day one. And that was an amazing conversation we had back then. To answer your question, everything's great up here. Everybody's healthy. You know, we're happy. We're just living our lives and going where we're useful. So everything's good.
Well, I got to tell you, at some point, you did a giveaway of some of your photos, and I was lucky enough to win it. It was not rigged. Like it was like, it was no joke. Like I was just lucky enough to win it. And so I've got your photo, the one called Three Kings, of those three guys and it's in my shed where I do my work, and it's directly over my left shoulder. So that's like awesome, all day long, you were influencing me and my work. And if I start slacking off, I'll look up at those guys. I'm like, oh man, I got to get going here. So
yeah, those guys are putting in work. That was in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and they're Pony Express riders. And that was the first rodeo that I went to. That was the first that was the first black rodeo that I went to. I was completely lost. I was wearing chinos and a linen shirt. Like I didn't know what I had come into and that it was going to completely take over my life. But I met those guys and snapped that picture, and they're just standing there looking like royalty. That's why I call it Three Kings. The guy's name on the right is literally Napoleon. And,
is it really?
Yeah, his name's Napoleon. And, I think that photo could have been taken at any point in history. The only real indication that it's from the last decade is the diamond stud in the middle guy's ear. But other than that, they're just classic cowboys buttoned up, ready to ride. And I love that photo. I love that you have it right above you. That's cool.
Yeah, it's like it's front and center in everything I do. So I appreciate that. I'd encourage people, if they haven't heard our first conversation, to go back, because we get into your whole journey growing up in Kansas City and just how this all started coming together. But I feel like I guess it's almost 5 years now. It's been 4.5 years. It's almost like you've lived a whole nother lifetime in there. And so I want to get right into everything you're doing now. And I think starting with kind of one of the most exciting things is we're coming into what'll be the third year of you producing your own rodeo, the Seconds Rodeo.
Yeah, man.
And so can you tell a bit about how that came to be? Obviously people have ideas and they pop in their head all the time. And at some point you thought, I should do my own rodeo. Then you actually did it, which is crazy. But I know from a little bit of my research that the idea may have popped in your head from a tragedy, if I'm correct on that.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is the follow-up, this is the sequel right here. Yeah. But it's a long connected story about how I was a photographer looking for a subject, and I came upon Black cowboy culture and just really organically kept going to rodeos and really started to develop relationships with these folks. I was shooting a campaign for Stetson back in 2020, and they needed a bull rider, and I asked around, and people were like, oh, you should go over to this kid named Ouncie Mitchell. And I went to Ouncie's house, and he was just coming back from a femur injury. Bull had stepped on his femur and snapped it. And he was coming back. The leg had healed all weird. So one of his legs was longer than the other one. And, he was kind of rusty on his skills. So he came out and rode this bull, good practice bull, and he covered it, rode for 8 seconds, and he said, load another one. And he got on his next bull and covered that one. And, we were just like in this muddy pen. It had rained 4 inches that night down in Houston, and he was just caked in mud, and the dogs were barking at the bulls, and there was electrical wires down in the water. It was just crazy. But I was out there shooting, and I think that was the first time that I got brave enough or stupid enough to shoot in the actual arena. I wasn't outside the fence, so there were bulls chasing me. I was jumping over the fence to save myself, and we got to talking afterward, and me and Ouncie just hit it off right away. I don't know why. He's a young kid, tons of confidence. He was sitting there telling me that he was back and he was going to win the world. He was going to win the NFR and bull riding, which nobody had done since Charles Sampson back in the 80s. And I was like, well, Ouncie, you're painting fire hydrants for the city of Houston. You don't have any money. You got a leg that you're healing up. Like, how are you going to do that? And he said, watch and see. So I went down there and I saw Ouncie a bunch. I'd see Ouncie at rodeos in Vegas and around Texas. And I would go down there and hang out with him. We would go to the turkey leg hut. We would go bowling. We would ride around in a car that I'd rented. I'd always get a nice sports car when I came down there, and we would just go cruising. We would eat crawfish together, and we just became friends really naturally. And he quit his job working for the city. He went out on FMLA and he got in his car and started driving from rodeo to rodeo. And he was doing really well. He was covering everything. And I remember the day that he broke into the top 50. The top 50 are on the PRCA website. And I saw his name and his picture pop up there. And I called him and I said, Ouncie, you did it, man. You did what you said you were going to do. He said, I said I was going to win the world. And then he broke into the top 40. He broke into the top 30. He broke into the top 20. He just kept going. When he was on the road, he was either sleeping in his car or he was staying with people he really didn't know that well to get a meal and to get a shower. And he ended up staying with this woman in Salt Lake, and they got in a fight and she shot and killed him. And it just broke the whole community's heart. Everybody was really devastated by this. I was devastated. I'd realized at that moment that, this was no longer a photo project. This was something really, really deep and really, really personal to me. So I was reading these news articles about Ouncie that were like, Black man dies in domestic violence incident, or bull rider gets killed by his girlfriend. And I was like, is that it? A whole life, a man who was a father and a son and a great athlete and a great friend. That's what he gets, is a couple of sentences in the news. So I started writing about him. I posted it on Instagram, and his mom shared it, and his cousin Ezekiel Mitchell, who rides in the PBR, he shared it, and a bunch of other people in the community started sharing this story that I wrote, and it was just like my experience with him, how good he could eat crawfish. Like, this kid could eat 4 crawfish for every one you ate. He was just like a machine. He had a crooked tooth. He had like one tooth that was longer than the other ones, and he got that filed down. And one day I showed up, and he just kept smiling at me. And I was like, man, what the hell's going on? And he's like, I fixed my tooth, man. And we just started cracking up. And I was just like, it was a little thing, but it made him a much better looking guy. And I just wrote all this stuff down, and it went, and a lot of people appreciated me sort of being the voice for the culture and representing him in that way. So how does that connect to rodeo? I was like, I got to do something to make sure that guys that want to win the world, women that want to achieve something that's never been done in barrel racing, that they have an easier time at it. And that when they're out there on the road and when they're going to rodeo, they have the equipment, they can get a hotel, they can get a car. And the best way that I could think to do that was to throw a rodeo, a big money rodeo. I had never planned a birthday party. I had never done anything of the sort. So I talked to my wife. She had just had our 3rd kid. And then I was like, babe, I'm going all in. I'm going to do a rodeo, and it's going to be, artfully done. Clearly it's going to be concert level lighting and audio. It's going to be in an arena. It's going to be, we're going to give away $60,000 in prize money. We're going to have the best cowboys in the country come. She kind of paused, and she said, do you feel like this is your calling? And I said, yeah, I think it is. And she said, all right, I'll do it with you. And we got to work.
So cool, man. And I feel like it lines up with so much of the way you've gone about other things in your life, where it's just kind of like commit and figure it out. Like, I saw an interview with you somewhere where you were talking about in your early days in the design world, and you kind of didn't really know what was going on, but you're like, I can figure this out. If these guys can figure this out, I can. And so Google became a really good friend, and you figured it out on the fly, and you did an awesome job. And then, I think with everything with your photography career, I think you've kind of been figuring that. But this is like that on steroids. I mean, so what was the step one? Like, you decide, your wife's in with you. We were saying before we recorded, both Ivan and I married, we outkicked our coverage with our wives, which were very but so what's the first step?
The first step was, when I'm moving like this, I know I got to move faster than my doubt, because as soon as my brain catches up and starts going, man, somebody could die. What about your insurance? Where are you going to do the venue? Where are you going to get all that dirt from? Where all that doubt starts creeping in. I won't do it. And so the first step was to book a venue. I was like, if I book a venue and I pay for it, then I'll have money in the game, and it's going to be harder for that doubt to convince me to go backward. picking a venue was tricky. It was like, oh, this is easy. Do the rodeo in Kansas City. That's where I'm from. The Cowboys live in Oklahoma and Texas. They can just drive up real easy. And, this shouldn't be a problem. Kansas City. But then I was like, well, the marketer and the publicist in me was like, that's not interesting. Rodeo in Kansas City is no big deal. Black rodeo in Portland, Oregon is crazy. Yeah. That's insane. That'll get attention. That'll have people perk up. We're in PETA heaven. We got the animal rights people going. There hasn't been a rodeo in Portland in 50 years. It's one of the smallest black populations of any major city in the United States. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it there. I want to take the hard road, and that'll get me a lot of attention, and that'll do a lot of good for these Cowboys. So, we went to Portland. We went to the big convention center there. I picked a place that was on the train line so people could get there easy. I wanted it to be directly in Portland. People were like, why don't you go do it at a rodeo grounds out in Boring, Oregon, out by the mountain? And I said, then it would be the boring black rodeo. I'm not doing that. Yeah. So I'm like, we want to do the Portland rodeo. We want the Portland line going. So booked the venue. Then I would say the next thing was that I had to convince Cowboys to come, which was a task. I made a flyer with the events and the payout for each event that I had seen in other rodeos, but then it said $60,000 on it. And people thought it was a scam. People thought it was so crazy to say, come drive your trailer over the Rockies to Portland for this $60,000 black rodeo. And, people were really confused. I had to call each Cowboy on the phone and calm them down, tell them who I was, tell them other Cowboys that I had known, tell them that I was doing this for Ouncie's legacy. And they all tentatively agreed to come. We did steer wrestling the first year, barrel racing, bull riding, bareback, and then we did mutton busting. Oh, nice. So the calf ropers were like, why not us? Why don't you do calf roping? So I had to explain to them, hey, we're in the middle of the city. I can't have 40 horse trailers in this little parking lot. It's just not going to work. And then I had to, find like fencing, dirt, stock, bleachers, lighting, audio, all of this stuff to sort of build out this giant convention center that we had, which was just a concrete room with nothing in it. I was sleeping on the couch one day, worried about where am I going to get animals? I don't know any stock contractors. I don't have an arena. Arenas cost like $100,000 plus. And I was sleeping on the couch. That's what I do when I get really stressed out and really nervous is I just pass out. I just fall asleep. My body just shuts down.
Just shuts it down.
Yeah. So I just fell asleep on the couch and my phone rang and this man answers the phone. His name's John Jardine. And he says, hey, this is John, man. And I'm like, what's up, John? He's like, you need somebody to do your rodeo for you? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I got stock. I got bleachers. I got fencing. I got bucking chutes. We can come out and do the whole thing. I got a whole crew of people from Sandy. We can work your rodeo. I got gatemen, shoot bosses, clowns, all the stuff that you need. And I was like, yeah, John. Yeah. Yes, you can work my rodeo. This is
How did
exactly
he find
what I
you?
need. Somebody had shared a post that I had put on Instagram with him, and he just called the number on the flyer.
That's awesome.
And I feel like God sent him to me because I was really out of my depth, and then I just felt like it was one of these golden shots that made the thing happen. So we put all the stuff together. I paid all my bills. I got sponsors in.
How'd the sponsors react to the idea?
Sponsors were generally on board. I couldn't get anybody to give me more than like $5,000 that first year. And the rodeo cost about $300,000 that first year to put on. The venue itself was $50,000. I spent $60,000 on dirt. I gave John Jardine a big chunk of money, and I had to raise it like $5,000 to $10,000 at a time. But we got great sponsors in. We got in Tacovas, we got in Wrangler, we got in Monster Energy, Jack Daniels, Bud Light. You know, we had like the biggest names in the space. But they were just like, we're going to see what you do. You know, we're going to give you a little bit.
Sure.
We're not going to go all in just yet. So it was a little bit tricky, but it was a lot of work. And I think selling was the one thing that I knew how to do. I didn't know anything about rodeo, but we got it paid for. We sold out all of our tickets that first year. We sold 2,000 tickets. And I was just sitting there on Saturday morning, like, I got everything that I need except for cowboys. There wasn't a cowboy there.
Mm-hmm.
And a horse trailer rolled in and a couple of cowboys were in there and they got out. And I was like, this is all I got. You know, y'all are going to have to do a couple of runs because I'm going to make you go over and over again.
Yeah.
Then a bull rider showed up on his flight, and then they just started coming in one after another. And we had about 28 people compete that first year. And it was just beautiful. I think the show started at 7 and I went out at 6:00 because a sponsor had paid late and I wasn't going to put their banner up until they actually paid their bill.
Nice.
At 6:00, I went out and was going to put this banner up, and I walked out into the arena that we had built and the stands were full an hour before the show. Everybody was there. You know, the Portlanders were there in Jordans in their outfits, cowboy hat on backward, but they were talking to each other, you know, having community. And I started crying. I was just overwhelmed that this thing was actually going to happen and that we had pulled it off.
That's just so cool, man. And like, just, I mean, this idea that popped in your head, you know, after a very terrible event, and then it was a reality, you know, and you're sitting there. I just can't even imagine it. That was a great description of it. So when, you know, during the night or when it's over, like, what was some of the feedback you got? Because I would imagine it was pretty emotional for a lot of people. And then, you know, it was positive enough on many, many levels that you decided, yeah, even with all that work, I want to do it again. I want to do it again and again after that. And so, like, do you have any memories of specific, maybe interactions with folks in the crowd or with the cowboys or whoever that was kind of gave you that psychic boost of like, yep, we needed to do this?
I didn't want to do it again.
Really?
No.
Were you just destroyed afterwards?
We were wrecked. Me and my wife.
I can't imagine.
That rodeo ended and we did the payout. We had to pay out that $60,000, and you know, the cowboys were arguing about it, whether they came in fourth or third place. And, you know, some of the barrel racers were mad that we only paid 4 holes when we should have paid 6. Because that's what the rule book was like. And I'm like, what rule book? This is an unsanctioned rodeo. There ain't no rule book. I told you we were paying for spots. And I was like, this is the furthest thing from the PRCA that you can get. You know, this is a rodeo in a convention center. And my wife just stayed calm. She got everybody paid. She had a big old box of fruit snacks. And so everybody that came up, she gave them a fruit snack. And so they were a little bit nicer to her. But we got everybody paid out. We loaded out everything that we had brought in with us that, you know, wasn't dirt, because we only had one day to pack this whole thing down and scoop up 1 million pounds of dirt and get all the fencing out and everything. But we got all of our stuff, our mutton busting helmets and vests and our roping dummies, and we got in the car. We drove home silent, sat in the driveway and just both of us just cried. We just wept. It was so stressful. And, you know, I think through the whole process, I just sort of steeled myself and stayed focused. And she went along for the ride, but it really wasn't until we got home and it was done that we were like, oh my goodness, like, this is over. Nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
You know, no bulls jumped the fence and ran away. Like, sure. All the bad things that could happen were still in my head, but I just sort of pushed him into the back until that moment. And, you know, I was just like, that was a work of art. That was a living piece of art. The way that I lit it, the audio, the performances. I was the announcer that first year because I couldn't find an announcer. Just all of it was so, it was everything that I had. I put my whole self into it. And I was just like, that was a gallery. That was an art show. And I did it. And there's no reason to do it again, was what I was thinking my first year. But I think we got on Instagram that night and started seeing what everybody had posted. And like everybody except for me and her had a wonderful time. The Cowboys had a great time. They were saying that it was the best rodeo that they'd ever seen. They were saying it was really well put together, and the fans were losing their mind. Most of our fans had never been to a rodeo before, and they were seeing a man ride a bronco and his hat flew off and his dreadlocks were blowing behind him, and the crowd, just joy was just leaping out of their bodies. People were hanging on the fences. The Cowboys were throwing their hats out in the audience. Like, it was just like great energy. And I saw these videos and I saw all these posts and all these comments from people, and people were like, see you next year. And
like, wait a minute.
This is a tradition now.
Get ahead of yourself.
So I think it took a few months. It probably took like 3 months, but then, I went back to Heather and was like, hey, let's think about doing another one. I think there are some places we can improve. I think we can do it better. And she said, do you feel like you have to do it, or do you want to do it? And I was like, I think I want to do it. And she's like, all right, let's do it. let's
was year two a little more streamlined? Like, did you feel like it wasn't as much of an ass whipper as the first year?
It was probably more so. That's the second year, because we scaled. We went from 2,000 people and a convention center to the arena. We went to the Veterans Memorial Coliseum where the hockey team plays and the WNBA team is going to be playing there. So we went to a 7,200 seat arena. That was our capacity in there. So just, and it's just my wife and I, and we're dealing with ticket issues and people wanting discounts and I think the second year the sponsors really didn't come in like they did that first year. We had to fight real hard to get the money and get creative with how we paid people. I realized, I don't have to, now that I'm a known entity, I don't have to pay all this money up front. Like the first year, people were like, nah, you're going to pay me before the show. I don't know you. The second year, I was like, hey, we sold out our first year. I've done this before. Can I pay you out of the ticket money? And most people were fine with that. So I only had to give them a deposit, and then I paid all my bills out of the gate, which helped immensely, because that meant I only had to raise half the money instead of raising it all up front. But that second year, the cost went from $300,000 to $500,000. So it was an enormous lift. But I mean, the thing that was better was that I had experience. The Cowboys trusted me. And we sold out tickets super fast. I mean, we sold half of our tickets day one.
That's crazy, man.
Of our release.
That is a serious, I mean, that, like, for people, I've been involved in a few events, and that's no joke. Those are real numbers.
Yeah. And then I could take that to people and say, hey, we've sold half of our tickets. That's guaranteed money. And then we were completely sold out 2 weeks before the event. And
so then you go from 300,000 to 500,000, get that figured out. Now you're like, all right, now we'll do 2 cities. So what's on tap for 2025?
2025 is going good so far. We've raised good money so far. We've got some bigger sponsors coming in. I feel like we've really laid the groundwork. We built the house. Now we get to live in it. So 2025, we're doing the show in Portland, which, we've got that locked in. We know how it works. There are some areas to improve for sure. There's some stuff to streamline. Our grand entry last year was a mess. I was back there telling Cowboys, go, walk out now, go, walk out and wave, and so I think we can smooth some of that stuff out. But, the vision is to help these Cowboys and infuse this community with capital and improve these folks' performances. And I can't make a big impact with just one rodeo. So we did the event in June. In October, we did a camp. We did a cowboy camp for bull riders, where they got to ride as much stock as their bodies could handle. And we had some coaches out there, some PBR guys out there giving them the best instruction we could pay for. And we really started to see guys improve their riding. So I'm like, I don't want you to just ride at my rodeo. I want you to ride. I want for a lot of these guys to be in the top 10 in the PRCA. You know, that's the vision. And then this year we're going to do the rodeo in Portland again on June 15th. And then on October 11th, we're going to do our second rodeo in Philadelphia.
Nice.
So super excited about that. Both of them will have about 8,000 people there this year. And, you know, I'm confident. Hey, Portland is the least black city in America. Philadelphia is the most black city in America. So to me, I'm like, it should be easier to sell tickets just based on that, you know, back in the napkin logic.
Well, that's exciting, man. It's one question, you know, obviously you're driven. I feel like with all your work, even before the rodeo, like when we first talked a long time ago, I feel like it's very clear to me from my outside perspective looking in, like you're driven by this desire to tell these important stories. It's kind of like you're driven by a service mentality. Like when it was just the photos, you're trying to tell these important stories that need to be told, that people need to hear. And it's not about you. It's about getting these stories out. And then with this whole rodeo, it's this whole different level, but it's still driven by a service mentality of trying to obviously spread awareness, but also help people and get people paid fairly.
Yeah.
But then as we were talking about before we started recording, when you Google your name, I mean, you are kind of the face of this thing. And I mean, you are the face of this thing, and people are very, very, very interested in you. And so how is that? How does that work with you? Because it seems that so much of your work is about shining the light on other people. And now you've become one of the main attractions, if not the main attraction, because people are so interested in you. How do you balance that in your head? Because it seems like you balance it very, very, very well, but it's kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum.
It's interesting, man. I think one thing is, you know, I really had to get real with myself. I said, now I was going to talk to this rich guy, multi hundreds of millions of dollars. And I was like, I signed up, messaged his team to mentor me, give me a mentoring session. And, part of that was he wanted to know who I was. He wanted to know about my business. So he sent me like a 200 question survey, and I started filling this thing out, and it was like, who's your business idol? And I was like, I don't have a business idol. Well, you know, the person that I really look up to is a photographer named Gordon Parks, who used to shoot Black culture. And, you know, he made the movie Shaft. He, wrote a book called The Learning Tree, which I really loved, growing up. And he was from Kansas, and I just really have walked in his footsteps as an artist, you know, because he did so many things and he did them incredibly well. You know, he would move from photography to writing to films just seamlessly and just be a master at them pretty quick. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So I'm writing down Gordon Parks, and I'm like, well, that's not very impressive for a guy that made, because I don't think Gordon Parks was rich. You know, I don't think he had much money at all. But he was excellent.
Sure.
And then it was like, you know, what did your business pull in last year? I wrote that down. Where do you want to scale to? And I was like, well, you know, about there. I would like to not, you know, have to take out a loan to put on the rodeo. I would like to not go broke doing this thing. I would like for the rodeo to be sustainable. But I don't have dreams of making millions of dollars at this. I don't have dreams of making any money off of it. I just like doing it. And I was just sort of writing this stuff down very honestly. And I was like, I want to do this business. I want to do this rodeo to help as many people as possible. That's really what makes me feel happy. And that's what makes me fulfilled. And just writing that out, I ended up being like, this isn't the right mentor for me. And I canceled the session. with him. Because I that really got me real with myself about why I'm doing this. As far as being the voice of, not only what we're doing in art and doing in the rodeo, and we're doing a lot. We've got our work in permanent collections in museums. Just came out with a book this year, which a lot of that press came from the book. There's a lot going on. The attention and all of the articles and all of the interviews and the stages that I go on are fine. I'm really enthusiastic to get other people excited about what we're doing. And, I think at this point, everybody knows that Black cowboys exist. I'm excited to get people to know the names of one, and to get to know the names of one that is living today. Some people may know Bill Pickett and Bass Reeves and a lot of these guys, but I want them to be excited about some of these men and women who are out there doing extraordinary things with their bodies right now. The key for me with all of this attention is I don't read any comments.
No, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I won't. I won't go in.
Don't look at it.
No, I don't look at it at all. If they're really positive and people are talking about how cool and handsome and kind I am, that's not good for me. And if people are talking about what a piece of crap I am, that's not good for me either. So I'm like, you can keep all of it. I don't really care what you have to say. so I stay out of the comment section completely, and really don't pay much attention when these things come out. I don't pay a lot of attention to what's going on social media either. I just sort of post stuff. I put stuff out there. I share stuff that other people post, and then I get off of there as quick as I can, because I know I got to protect my brain and I gotta protect my ego, and I got to protect my feelings.
Well, and the way I think about it is like, if you start buying into all the positive stuff these strangers are saying, you're probably going to buy into it, the negative stuff they say too. And it's just kind of like, I think you're a perfect example of somebody that just follows your gut, and who would have ever guessed, like if you had gone to some business coach and pitched this idea for everything, they're like, well, that's never been done. I don't like that idea, whereas like, you're like, no, this is what needs to be done, and I'm going to do it. And now everybody's like, oh, it was a great idea. But I think your trajectory is such a great kind of case study in just like following your gut on these things and following your passion and what you feel like this service mentality. I think that's one of the things that comes up time and again with everybody I have on these podcasts, is like, everybody needs to earn a living. Yeah. But at the end of the day, people are doing this work for something deeper than that. Am I off, or am I right on that?
No, that's completely right. I love money, man. Money's amazing. Yeah. Money's good stuff, and if you don't have any of it, go get some, because it makes everything easier, but it's not a great motivator for me. It's not a great why I do anything. For purpose, for me, I just love helping people. We gave out $60,000 that first year, and I saw guys go out and get their PRCA card. Some of our bullfighters went out and got their PRCA card and stayed on the road, all summer, going from rodeo to rodeo. And some of our bull riders did too. They just didn't go home. They took that check and went to the Malala Buckaroo the next weekend right there in Oregon, and then went to another rodeo and just kept going until they were out of money. And I love to see that. A lot of times these guys will only compete in 5 to 10 rodeos a year. And I saw them out going to 20, 25 rodeos. And I saw a guy down in LA take his money. He won a ton of money at steer wrestling because nobody else caught a steer but him. So he got the whole thing. And he went and got a horse trailer, and it's just like, that's amazing. Now he can move his animals around. Now he can put in a lot of work. People put work into their houses and into their ranches. That makes me feel wonderful. And that's a motivator. That's a driving force for me to go do something, not money.
Yeah, that's real impact. You mentioned a minute ago about your book, and I don't want to let that just slide by, because like, I think people listening could be like, oh yeah, of course Ivan's got a book out, you know, he's great photography, he's doing all that stuff. But I want to make sure people remember the process you went through to make that book. Cause I remember, we talked on the phone soon around this time, but when you first had the idea for the book, no publishers were biting and you did it your damn self.
Yeah.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah. I reached out to everybody trying to make this photo book. Cause I'd been shooting when we had talked the first time, I'd been shooting for about 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? It's time to put a bow on this thing. I've done enough. I'm going to take all those photos. I'm going to compile them into a book and push that out in the world and be done cowboying. And that's what I did. You know, no publisher would buy it. They all said it's too small of a world. They were like, it's not a big enough subject and you're not a big enough name. And so I heard this time and time again. They were like, we do books like, you know, Sleepy Cats, something that you can give to somebody for a gift and they can keep it on their coffee table. And if it's not Sleepy Cats, it's a celebrity, you know, that has work. And you're not either one of those. And I was like, dang, that sucks. You know, that was reading the comments right there that got in my head a little bit. And so I wanted to get this book out. So I did a Kickstarter to raise the money. I needed $16,000 to pay for the books. I was going to do a run of 600. And I needed to get them printed and I needed to have the shipping materials to actually get them out to people. And I did the Kickstarter for $16,000. We ended up raising $26,000. And we got this giant pallet of books delivered to our house. And me and my wife packaged them up and mailed out each one around the world. You know, people in Australia and Sweden were buying these books. We mailed some to Brazil. Most of them were in the United States, thankfully, because the shipping at that time to Australia was like $90. we would have lost our butts if a lot of international people bought them, but got it out in the world, 600 copies. And, you know, if you've got one of those and it's signed today, that book is worth about $200. I've seen them come up on eBay. So it's a really rare book. I've only got like 3 of them myself.
I got one, but I'm not selling it.
Yeah, please don't. Yeah, don't sell them. $200 isn't worth it. Wait till I die at least. Yeah. But I was like, man, the 600 copies, you know, and have an impact and getting people to know who these cowboys are and rooting for these cowboys. I wanted to get this story out wider than that. So, knowing that the publishers weren't interested in investing in the book, I was like, let me take all the investment out of the deal. So I put in $20,000 of my own money. I hired a designer to design the book. I hired an editor, Miss Rosen, to edit the book. You know, the thing about my first book was I edited it, I designed it, I did everything. And it was all the best photos that I've ever taken.
Yeah.
I showed it to Miss Rosen and she said, it's beautiful. They're beautiful photos, but it's like a wedding album. It's too perfect. And there's no sense of place. There's no build up. Sometimes you just need to show a photo of an old church or of a thorny field, you know, to give people a sense of place. So she really like composed it and made it a day in the rodeo, going from people just sort of hanging out and showing up to people competing in sports. And it was really, really a beautiful story that we tell visually. And she had really good connections in the publishing industry. She sent it to 3 publishers. 2 of them said absolutely not. And the third one was Damiani, well-respected Italian publisher. And they said, yeah, like all we have to do is print it and put it out. That's easy. So got a published book out there. It's sold out at the publisher in about a month. And it's sold out most places online. The only place you can get it is my website. I've got some copies of it, but, you know, we pushed that thing out there and it did really well. We got lots of press because it came out right when Beyonce's Cowboy Carter came out.
Oh yeah.
And so like, we just sort of followed her around in the press. It was like W magazine was like Beyonce goes west, and then like right beneath her, it was like, and Ivan is doing something too. And so we was just like sort of right behind her during her press tour. It was really, really lucky how that worked out.
Well, lucky, but then also, I mean, what, 10, 11 years of hard work in the making? I think it's easy to, that's another thing, another common trait of people on the podcast is the humility, and everybody's talking about how lucky they are. But I mean, you were prepared for the moment, which is really cool.
Yeah, completely prepared for it, had influence in it, put in tons and tons of work. Like I said, back in 2020, I was ready to hang out my hat, and here we are in 2025, and I'm still doing the same thing. I called my wife crying. I went to the Roy LeBlanc Invitational Rodeo in 2021, and I said, "Babe, this is my last rodeo. I'm just so sad." And she was like, "No, it's not. Like, it doesn't have to be. You can keep doing this as long as you want." And I was like, "Oh, well, cool. I didn't think about it that way." I was there the next year.
Well, on your website, there's these amazing stories and profiles of different people in different places. And there was one that caught my eye from Eastern North Carolina, which is where I'm from. And that town is just, probably 30 minutes from where I grew up, about the cotton farmers.
Yeah.
And your writing is just so awesome. And so do you think will you ever write a book and have it more, more focused on the storytelling versus the photos? I mean, because I feel like there's a great opportunity there, given everybody you've seen combined with your skill as a writer.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, wow, that's a high compliment. That's probably the area that I'm most insecure about is the writing. I'm pretty confident with the photography, and I don't need any validation on the event planning. I know I'm bad at that, but the writing, I've not considered myself a writer. I don't really get poetic with it. I just sort of say what happened. I'm very literal with the writer. It was raining, and then we went out and we did this, and then this happened, and then this happened, that's very kind of you. As far as writing a book, I just haven't had the confidence to like sort of lean into the words that way. But I've had other people say, "Hey, you've got the source material of this period in the West. You've got the source material for this culture and these people in this time. It's your duty. It's really something that you should do to archive it and to share it with as many people as you can." And so that's why I have the stories. That's why they're forward on the website. I would put them in a book eventually. I think I need to capture a lot more of the things that I've experienced and a lot of the things that happened. But that's definitely something that's in the back of my mind. That's on my radar.
I'll buy it.
All right,
I'll buy everything you sell, man.
It's gonna have so many typos in it.
I bet in a year or two, AI will fix all that instantly. I got one more kind of question for you. We're talking about social media and that stuff, Instagram in particular, it kind of goes in my eyes, and then it goes through my brain, and then it disappears. But there was one post that you put up, and it may have been years ago, but it's stuck in my brain. And it was about your decision to wear a cowboy hat.
Mm-hmm.
And you had said you always wore like a ball cap, and you never felt like you should be wearing a cowboy hat. And it was this really great explanation of how you kind of came to the idea to wear that. And I think it falls in line with everything we've been talking about, being authentic, finding yourself, being confident. Would you mind talking about that process you went through, if you don't mind?
Yeah, when I would shoot, I would wear a Kansas City Royals hat. I'm from Kansas City, but I just felt like it was more authentic to me and the appropriate wear for what I was doing. These rodeos are hot. You're in the sun. You're on a fence. I needed to wear a hat, but I felt like wearing a Kansas City Royals hat represented where I was from, but it was also a connection point to a lot of these cowboys to say, "Hey, I'm not from New York City. I'm not from Portland, Oregon. I'm from somewhat around here." So that's why I would wear that hat. I was at a rodeo and somebody was like, "You're not dressed. You shouldn't be on the chutes." And I was like, "Well, I've got on pants and a shirt and a hat." But they were like, "No, if you're going to be on the chutes, you're visible. You're seen. You're going to be on camera. You got to have on a cowboy hat and a button down and a belt and jeans and boots. That's the dress code." And so I started dressing the part when I went to rodeos so that I didn't stand out, so that I wasn't like an obvious outlier in this sort of scene that they're creating and that's being presented at the rodeos. And, that just felt like workwear, in which I think of the cowboy hat. It can be fashion. I think anybody can wear a cowboy hat that wants to, but it's also like kind of wearing like a fireman's hat. It's got a purpose.
Yeah.
It represents something. And I think like when you're in these spaces, wearing a cowboy hat, works well if you're actually doing cowboy stuff and documenting the culture and being present in that way was something that I needed to dress up for. So now I wear it anytime that I'm doing anything cowboy. If I'm at a rodeo or I'm speaking about the culture, I wear my hat. I've got a 10X beaver Ariat hat that I wear. It's starting to get a funky shape to it, which I really like because that means that I'm like sweating in it and getting some used to it. It's not like overly nice. And then when I'm at the rodeo, even though it's in the summer, I wear that beaver hat because I'm like, this is what a rodeo head puts on. I don't wear straw. I'm not working hard. I'm not sweating. I'm sitting up here in the box in the air conditioning. So I've got on my beaver hat.
Man, I'm not going to allow 4 or 5 years to go by before we talk again. I'm going to start hassling you. I've always wanted to be not to like be blowing up your text and everything, but I just love these conversations, whether they're recorded or not. And so I want to do more of that. And I'm going to have links to everything in the episode notes. Anywhere you'd like to direct people who are listening to this, who may want to learn more about what you're doing, get tickets to the rodeo whenever they're available, like where should people go?
You can go to the number 8 secondsrodeo.com. And from there you can learn about the rodeo, the dates for the 2 rodeos. Please come if you get a chance to. And if you're not in Philadelphia or Portland, go to another Black rodeo, go to a Bill Pickett rodeo or a Black Rodeo USA event and just like experience the culture and support it because it's really incredible. And then at that 8secondsrodeo.com, you can also find a link for my book. And I'll send all that stuff to you as well, Ed.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks, man. I love catching up with you. So inspiring. And I can't wait to see where it all continues to go. But thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I'll be in touch with you real soon.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number 1, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number 2, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.